Hi everyone, Mackenzie Zajan here, owner and founder of Inner Nutritionist. And I'm here to speak with you today about how to stop your emotional eating in the moment. We are having an online gathering here and we've had, again, some more technological difficulties. So I need to share in the chat box here. Try again, refresh your browser, and let's do this, I hope. Okay, so if you can in fact see me live, please let me know in the chat box. That would be so wonderful. Thanks for your patience. I'm officially going to move over to new technology next time. This is 2 times in a row and it's a real bummer. So hopefully we will have better luck this time around. Yay. Okay, good. Everyone can hear me. Gosh, thanks guys. Thanks for really hanging in there. I'm so sorry about that. Unfortunately, I spent about 15 minutes talking to myself, thinking that I was live. So let's just start from the top. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a master's level nutritionist. I'm also have my master's in health psychology, and helping women in the food and body struggle and come home to a body and a nutrition plan they feel good about is what I do best. And I want to thank you so much for taking this time to meet with me today. I value your time so much, and I promise today is going to be worthwhile. And for those of you who've stayed on for an extra 20 minutes or so through this another round of technological difficulties, a special thank you goes out to you. So what I want you to do right now is log into that chat box if you haven't already. I know many of you have, and feel free to log in anonymously. And what I'm going to cover today are the 3 types of overeating. One of them is going to be emotional overeating, but it's really important that we know the different types of overeating. And so I wanted to really make sure we cover those today. Today, I'm also going to answer your question of how do I stop my emotional eating in the moment? I get this question all the time from my clients, and today I want to get you some answers. And I'm also going to get you the answer to your question, what to do when you feel like your emotional eating is coming on. Okay, so we're going to be covering these for about 30 minutes or so, and then I'll be leaving about 10 or 15 minutes for questions at the end. Many of my online gatherings, if you're new to these gatherings, they're more like workshops, and they're intended to get you thinking in new ways. So you'll definitely want to grab a pen and paper and take notes. Okay, so just one word about this technology. If you might be a few minutes behind, it just depends on when you pushed play on that video. So if you see the chat box moving and it feels off or not synced up to the live video, that's why. And if it's bugging you or annoying you, just fast forward the video to be in real time, and then you can go back and watch it after we're done. The video will be up and posted. Okay, good. So let's get started. Okay, without further ado. So go ahead and set aside anything you had that you're multitasking as you're waiting for me. And let's get present to this time. Okay, today's topic is about emotional overeating, and it's specifically how you stop your emotional eating in the moment. But before we dive headfirst into emotional eating, I do want to clarify a few things about overeating itself. Most women think that overeating is because, or they're overeating is because they don't have any control, they don't have any willpower, they're a food addict, they're a carb addict, there's just nothing out there that's going to work for them, or they haven't found the right diet or approach yet. I know this type of thinking so well, and I fell into this thinking for a really long time, but the truth is that thinking just doesn't take us very far. And it's not the most self-empowering thinking. I think we can all agree to that. And what I want to help you with is I want to help you increase your self-leadership around food. And how I want to do that today and right now is to share with you these 3 types of overeating so you can more fully understand your overeating processes. It might not be emotional. It might be something different. So I want you to have this knowledge, because when we have knowledge, we have power. So the first type of overeating is overeating due to biological reasons. If you restrict, if you're dieting, if you go hungry, if you push back your hunger, or anything else happens during the day that restrains your eating, like you get stuck in a long meeting, you will overeat. It might not be that exact day. It might be the next day. It might be later in the week. I'm sure all of us have had that experience of coming home and we're ravenous and we're hangry and we get to the table and we just scarf food down, or we don't even get to the table. We just stand up in the kitchen. There's a reason for that. The body has hundreds of mechanisms in play that interpret that period of hunger as a famine. And boy, the body does not like that. The body wants to survive first and foremost, and it takes this very seriously. It will bring on cravings and urges and having you eat and to eat a lot. Hormones and enzymes are released into the blood that will having you want to feast. This has nothing to do with willpower control. This is how the body works. So do not confuse biological overeating with your emotional overeating. Many women do. Many women just hang their hat and self-identify with, I'm an emotional eater, I'm a compulsive eater, I'm a mindless eater. In reality, you're overeating. Some of it, part of it, maybe all of it might be due to these biological reasons. Because you wait too long to eat, or you don't eat enough, or you're dieting. You cannot defeat your biology. That's like trying to hold your bladder all day. So don't confuse biological overeating with emotional overeating, okay? Now, the second type of overeating is overeating due to psychological restriction. Overeating due to psychological restriction. If you put yourself through a mental restriction, for example, you say no to a specific food, you think certain foods are bad or to be avoided, you have certain rules around foods, you will inevitably overeat those foods. This is how the human brain works. Again, this is not about willpower. This is not about control. This is about psychology. The more you mentally fight food, the more the mind wants that food. And the fact that the more you will yourself, the more it backfires. It's rules and fighting that make you overeat the food. So don't confuse psychological overeating with emotional overeating. Okay? Now, the third type of overeating is overeating due to emotional reasons. And this is our topic today. And I want to start off this section by sharing with you that emotional eating is 100% normal. Now, hear me out. When we eat, we feel a sense of pleasure. And thank goodness, too, right? If eating wasn't pleasurable, we wouldn't have much interest in food. I mean, the entire survival of the human species depends on our willingness, our excitement around food, okay? So there's pleasure centers that light up in our brain when we eat. So we take more interest in food so we can survive. This is an emotional process. This is a survival process. So in a phrase, all eating is an emotional act. Emotional overeating happens when we start to abuse that pleasure of eating. In other words, we become emotionally dependent on the food to soothe us through life's challenges, to bring forth more pleasure in life when life is hard. Life is hard, guys. It's messy, right? So when an emotion occurs in life, anger, sadness, anxiety, overwhelm, boredom, loneliness, and even excitement and happiness and celebration, I learned somewhere down the line, and for me it was somewhere around 8 years old, to turn to food. And we're going to talk a lot more about this, but for now I would love to just hear in the chat box what's resonating with you with this. What do you feel like you're learning? What do you still have questions about in regards to these three types of overeating? Go ahead and just say something in the chat box to let me know what you're thinking about when it comes to these three types of overeating. I'm just going to quickly summarize because that was a lot of information. So overeating due to biological restriction is when our food intake is low. Your body becomes frightened. I mean, literally, it assumes a famine is taking place. And in turn, it turns on lots of mechanisms to have you feasting and overeating. This is a very normal, natural process. It's a survival process. And this type of overeating has everything to do with food. Okay? Overeating due to psychological restriction has to do with how you relate to the food. If you're walking around saying that's good food, that's bad food. If you're swearing off carbs or sugar, you will abuse those exact foods you tried so hard to avoid. Okay, overeating due to emotional reasons doesn't have to do with food or relating to food. What does it have to do with? It has to do with life. Something happens in life, it creates an emotional reaction in you, and you turn to food to soothe the emotion, whether it's stress or happiness. Okay? So good. Go ahead and just share in the chat box what's coming up for you around this. I'd love to hear from some of you. And my intuition tells me there's a delay today, so I'm just gonna kind of keep going here. Yeah, someone says I can check all boxes. I do it all, but it helps to hear it all explained. Yeah, good. I'm so glad that it helps to feel like it's all explained. I wish somebody had told me about this, honestly. Instead, it just feels murky, right? It's hard to even understand what's going on sometimes with food. So I'm glad that this has been helpful for you. I can relate to the good food, bad foods, and self-loathing with food. Yeah. Yep. Good. Sonia just says, yep. Okay. Wonderful. All right, so let's move on to your questions. How do I stop my emotional eating in the moment? And what do I do when I feel my emotional eating coming on? I'm going to start with this first question of how to stop your emotional eating in the moment. Now, the answer to this question requires us to look specifically at one thing, and that is which moment are we talking about? Because there's two really important moments in this work that need attention. And those are, this first moment of when your emotional eating is actually happening in the moment. It's right there in front of you. You're there, you're in it. And then there's another moment where you sort of come to and you're looking back at the eating, and it's more in hindsight, and you're noticing the emotional eating that already took place in the past. Okay, and I want you to think back to the last few times you emotionally overate. Were you aware you were emotionally eating in the moment? Or did you become more aware after the eating? This is going to vary depending on the day, depending on where we are in this work. Maybe you have no idea, and that's something to pay attention to this week. Most likely all of us can relate to a bit of both. We're both, we've experienced that present moment, and then we've also experienced that moment where we wake up and we're like, wow, it's been 3 days of emotional eating, or wow, that was a whole hour's worth of emotional eating. And it's kind of more in hindsight. So I want to first turn our attention to that moment when it's in hindsight, when we're sort of waking up to the emotional eating that's already taken place in the past. So when you find yourself in this moment, what I want you to do in this moment is, when you're looking back at your patterns, is remember that hindsight learning is an excellent way to work on your emotional eating. I don't want you to make that crucial and critical mistake so many women make and start beating yourself up like crazy. I was one of those women for years, so I get it. So this takes practice and this takes time, yet it is possible. So instead of beating yourself up, which just leads to more emotional eating, what I want you to do when you're looking back in hindsight, whether it's been an hour or it's been a week, instead of beating yourself up, I want you to get really curious. I want you to be like a scientist who thinks her experiment is going one way and then it turns out to go another way. We all know what that's like. We often go into the day with the greatest intentions, and then it starts to veer off, right? So when your experiment goes differently than you would like or than you imagine, this is a critical time. This is when you want to collect data. You want to start an investigation. Like a scientist, she asks, well, what happened here? How can I learn from this? And if I got really curious about this, what would I find? What would I see? What kind of data would be here for me to collect? Okay. Now here's the catch. If you've been in hindsight learning 100 times, or you've been in it what feels like 1,000 times, it is still your ally in helping you learn more about your emotional eating. And if you feel like you're in that 100th or 1,000th cycle, I know it's exhausting, and my heart goes out to you. Yet this is the path, okay? And I'm just gonna tell you straight up, women who exercise curiosity and they're able to detach and be like a scientist who's observing their own patterns, they start to make lasting strides and they have more energy. Women who think they should have figured it out and beat themselves up, they go in circles. Spending all of that time thinking we should have it figured out or yelling at ourselves is absolutely exhausting. And I spent an entire online gathering on this topic last month. So if you need more support on this, and if you missed it, go ahead and go to YouTube and search Enter Nutritionist and look for the title of the gathering, the number one reason you get in your own way. And meanwhile, you want to put on that lab coat and be that scientist, okay? Great. I'm going to offer one more tool for this hindsight learning that I'll cover in the next session. Okay, it's going to be called your checklist. I'm going to help you title this checklist, and I'll tell you all about that in a few minutes. But let's turn our attention now to when your emotional eating is happening right there in the moment. And I'm just curious if anybody has anything to say about hindsight learning, their frustrations with it, or what they'd like to recommit to around hindsight learning, or anything that's resonating with them or they still have questions about. Please go ahead and share that in the chat box. Okay, so let's talk about that moment, the second moment of when the emotional eating is happening right then and there. The first thing I want to call out about this moment is if you are willing yourself to stop and you're just saying no to the food, or you're screaming at yourself and telling yourself not to eat it, it's really hard to follow through on that. If it was that easy, if it was just a matter of doing that, would have worked by now. We wouldn't all be here. So you've tried that and it doesn't work. What works is we want to understand that something bigger is going on. Something maybe bigger than you might not realize is occurring. And the thing that's happening under the undercurrent is a neurological pattern that all emotional eaters truly need to know about. Okay, and I want to explain this neurological pattern to you. So what this neurological pattern looks like is that we learned at some point to become emotionally dependent on food, right? We already described that in the overeating section, where we started to use food for comfort. We had years worth of training where an emotion would occur and then we would eat. An emotion would occur and then we would eat, right? An emotion would occur and then we'd soothe ourselves, comfort ourselves. Those neurons started to wire together. Specifically certain emotions, maybe all emotions, but specific emotions too, would get connected to food. Stress would happen, then the body thinks about food. Excitement or celebration happens, body thinks about food. In short, our emotions get super glued to food. Now, this pattern is actually really, from a survival standpoint, really smart. Think about this with me for a minute. From a biological, neurological perspective, our entire MO as a human species is to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's what we're set up to do, seek pleasure and avoid pain. So why would we feel loneliness or anxiety when we could be eating ice cream or potato chips or cookies? The food is running in to comfort you and soothe you. Okay? So something happens in life. You had a tough phone call with a family member. You didn't get much rest over the weekend. Maybe your self-care has been really low. Maybe there's a work project that you're really preoccupied about. An emotion is evoked and then we react, and this coping mechanism takes place. And for many of us, we turn to food. And this goes lightning fast. It's just zoom. We don't even know what's happening. It happens so fast. And most of us wake up when we're eating the food or when the food has already happened right then and there. Right then and there, or in the hindsight moment, right? So what I want to help you with is I want to help you break up these neurological patterns. It is absolutely possible to do this, okay? And if you start to do things even just a slight bit differently, these patterns and these pathways start to alter themselves. So how I want you to start doing this week is look closely at your decision making. Okay? So we're going to talk just a little bit about decision making. I'm going to go to the chat box. Yeah, good. Okay, so there's some insights coming through for sure here. I love it. Good. Wonderful. Okay, so hopefully there'll be a few more here. So what I want you to do to help break up these neurological patterns, they go so fast, they zoom. And what we need to do is start breaking them up a little bit, altering them. And one way you can do that is to start really looking very closely at your decision making. And how you start looking at your decision making is you first want to look closely at your inner dialogue and what you're saying to yourself in the moment when your emotional eating is taking place or is about to take place. Okay? So you might be saying, I'm not hungry, but I really want that and I don't care and I'll figure it out later. There's so many things we could be saying to ourselves. If you know what you say to yourself, please share it in the chat box. I'd love to hear, and I know you're not alone. We all have very similar kind of tapes that run through during this time. You might be saying, oh, that tastes so good. I'd like more even though I'm not hungry. And I really shouldn't do it. I shouldn't really eat it, but I'm going to have it anyways. I don't care. To heck with it. I'm going to eat whatever I want. It might be a series of some parts of these or all of these. So I'd love to hear what you say to yourself. I say, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care is a big one. Absolutely. So I know in this moment, the food urges can be really strong and it's all you can think about. And you might be thinking, I don't care. You might start to get into negotiations or bargaining. I'll do better tomorrow. Right now, I don't care. I'll start to care later, or I'll figure it out later. Whatever, I'm just going to eat this right now. Those are all examples of passive decisions. Yeah, screw it. I'm going to eat it anyway. Exactly. So I got it. What I really want you to see is those are examples of passive decisions. What I want you to start doing this week is I want you to start making direct decisions. Direct decisions include self-leadership, where you're leading yourself through the process. And I'm going to walk you through a few ways I recommend you lead yourself through that process starting this week. The first thing I recommend you say to yourself is you take the steering wheel and you say, I am going to emotionally eat this right now. I'm going to engage in emotional eating. I know I'm not hungry. I know I don't need this, and I'm still going to have it anyway. This more self-empowered place is where you want to be practicing. You want to be in this space more often. It's like you have that steering wheel, right? You're making the call. And I really recommend this as a first step. No matter how long you've been working through your emotional eating, just grab that steering wheel and practice this. I'm going to emotionally eat this right now. It's not because I'm bad, or I'm not going to figure it out but later, or it's not that I don't care. Those are passive, and those thought patterns are part of that old neurological pathway. So take that steering wheel, okay? That's a really beautiful step and powerful step. I'm gonna emotionally eat this right now. I'd love to hear what you think about this, okay? Yeah. All right. Now, the second type of direct decision you can walk yourself through is to say that I'm going to emotionally eat this right now, and I am going to practice one alternative coping mechanism in addition. Now, I know you want to just jump from your emotional eating straight into alternative coping mechanisms. I know you want to do that like starting yesterday, but you do have to go through a period where both are happening, where you're emotionally eating and practicing alternative coping mechanisms. Even if you've been here before, even if you've been here that 100 times or 1,000 times, right? Keep practicing this. This takes a ton of compassion and friendliness towards yourself. Those patterns of self-criticism and judgment are not allies here. So right now, I just want to spend 1 minute brainstorming together alternative coping mechanisms, right? Because this is not about the food. Emotional overeating is about life and our emotional reaction in life. And then food is the coping mechanism. Do not make the mistake of just trying to change your food without there being practice of alternative coping mechanisms that start to take the place of food. You know, that would just be a big hole in your life. We have to practice those alternative coping mechanisms. Until those are established, food will always come to the rescue. Okay? So go ahead and share in the chat box, what are some alternative coping mechanisms that you're currently practicing or that you're currently trying or that you've tried in the past? You know, maybe it's taking a bath. Maybe it's playing with your pets. Maybe it's journaling or taking a nap. Maybe it's having a really hard cry. That was a big one for me. I had to cry a lot. I still cry a lot. You know, you might realize that it's not food your body needs, it's water. You know, or it's hydration of some kind. Now, if you're sitting here going, this list again, because I know we've all heard this list. How many times did I hear this list when I was healing my emotional eating? Hundreds of times. So if you're sitting here going like, oh, this feels like BS, I just think that's really normal. You know, that's really normal when food has a hold on us, when food is the number one thing. It doesn't feel like anything else can replace it. I just think that's really normal. It just shows that food still really has a hold on you, and that's okay. You might have to fake it till you make it. You will have to go through a period of faking it till you make it. And then eventually with time and practice, these start to feel more real. Okay, so I hear some people go for a walk, listen to music. Yeah, music's a big one. You know, just a word on music for a moment. I don't even know if I could find the study for you if you wanted to read it. But I remember in grad school reading a study that solely looked at how music impacted binge eaters, and that with that urge to binge, if you can just put on some music, nothing's going to be a quick fix, nothing's going to be perfect, but it did show that that was one of the most successful alternative coping mechanisms than others. That music really starts to change that neurological pathway. Yeah, going for a walk. Yeah, I find though if I still do this, I think about food and end up eating eventually anyways. Why? Yeah, exactly. You know, the food, it is that rescue. It is that neural pathway. It's your main coping mechanism. Okay, so just keep showing up, you know, keep trying, and a ton of compassion, a ton of friendliness towards yourself. That's really the huge part of this work, is compassion work for yourself. And that when you do find yourself maybe trying alternative coping mechanisms and then you want to go back and you still want to eat, you just like you would a daughter or a friend. You would say, well, okay, looks like we need to eat something. So what are we going to eat? What are we going to emotionally eat right now? And bring that compassion. Compassion is the way out. Okay, so other alternative coping, guess 768. Let me know how that lands for you, okay? Getting out of the house, also drinking water, alternative coping mechanisms. Yeah, I'm trying out kindness and listening. Sonia says, I'm trying out kindness and listening to what it is that I really need. Journaling, taking a break from it all, and breathing. Yeah. So that kindness, and then also that break taking. We work so hard. Emotional eaters work so hard. We're exhausted. So absolutely taking a break, reconnecting, so important. Okay. All right. So we talked about making direct decisions, not passive decisions. Passive decisions are just like, oh, well, here I go again, or I don't care, or direct decisions are, I'm going to eat this emotionally right now. Even though if I said that 5 minutes ago, or I went for a walk and I still want the food, I'm still going to say if that's what I need to do right now, that's what I'm going to do. Then we practice those alternative coping mechanisms as well. Okay, so let's move to one final tool that I have for you today around this. When your emotional eating is happening in the moment, I really want to recap that many emotional eaters make the mistake of solely focusing on the food. Don't do that. Instead, I want to have you set yourself up for success by reflecting on life events that may have taken you into the emotional eating in the first place. Okay. So what I want to support you with is this tool today. Okay, it's a checklist, and you can use it during hindsight learning. You can use it in the moment. It's a list of questions that you can ask yourself. Sorry, I'm a little distracted because I'm pulling it up right now. It's a list of questions you can ask yourself when you're willing and able to investigate further, what life events may have caused you to react and then engage in emotional eating. Because remember, food is not the target. Life stressors are the target. Food is just the coping mechanism. It's the thing coming to the rescue. The real target are those life stressors. So grab your pen if you haven't already, and I want you to title this checklist, My List of Questions to Ask Myself in the Moment or in Hindsight. Now, okay, let me say that one more time. My list of questions to ask myself in the moment or in hindsight. It's starting to rain. That's so funny. Okay, let's bring my computer in a little bit. Okay. So just a quick warning. I'm about to list off a lot of questions, probably a dozen or so. Do not take them all on. Do not write them all down. Simply write down what speaks to you today in the moment and use those. This video will be on YouTube. You can always come back to it. But right now, less is more. Okay, so just write down what speaks to you. So here's your list of questions to ask yourself in the moment or in hindsight. And start to think about what questions you maybe already ask yourself as well. So the first question to maybe ask yourself is there a project I'm putting off? Is there a project I'm putting off? How about a hard conversation? Is there a hard conversation I'm putting off? Is there an email or a phone call that I really need to make and that I'm putting off? Is there something that I need to speak up about and that I'm not speaking up about? Is there something I'm worried about? Something I'm ruminating about? Another really just quick way to get to that one is just, what am I thinking about? What if you feel stressed and it's like, what am I thinking about? Okay, and that's like a breadcrumb. So what am I just thinking about or worrying about? How about, is there something I'm over planning or perfecting? Is there something I'm over planning or perfecting? Is there anything going on at work? Anything stressful that might be going on at work? Or maybe you're taking on a big project at work. You're being asked to play bigger at work. What about my body? Have I been hating my body lately? How much stress has that caused me, hating my body? How about this one? This will resonate with some of you. Am I parenting my parents? Am I parenting my parents? That's inevitably a lot of stress. What's going on in my love life or lack thereof? What has angered me lately or really gotten under my skin? Okay, there's a few more. What's my mood been like lately? What's my mood been like lately? Have I been feeling unworthy, like I'm not enough? And then the final question I have to offer you is, when's the last time I took a break, like a really rich and restful break? Like Sonia was saying, like really stop to breathe and gave yourself that time. When's the last time you did that? And go ahead and share in the chat box any questions you ask yourself or any that you know you need to put on your list. Ones that I didn't cover today that you know you need to put on your list. And let this be a resource for you. And if you were to remember just one thing today, my hope is that you remember that emotional overeating is not about the food. It's about these life stressors. And these are the things that need attention. The food is just trying to help. It's trying to comfort you. It's trying to soothe you. It is not the problem. So a question for me that I asked myself this week is, do I have an online gathering coming up where I want to do really well? That was a question I asked myself this week when there were a couple more chocolate chip cookies than usual occurring. Okay, so a couple questions coming in. Sonia says, I think my last really restful break was November. I'm so glad that you can be aware of that. Sonia, sounds like it's overdue. Yeah, one person says, how's my family treating me? Right. Love that. I think that's really important. What can I do today to practice good self-care? Yeah. Right. So the question might be, when's the last time I practiced self-care? That might be those breadcrumbs that you want to follow to be like, all right, of course I'm using food. Food is stepping in because I'm not meeting my needs. I'm not maybe having a hard conversation I need to have, or I'm not making boundaries with my family, or, many, many things here. So I want to thank you all so much for meeting with me today. And we're right at about 40 or 35 minutes, even though we're an hour past because of our technological difficulties. So I want to value your time. That's everything that I have planned for you today. I would love to hear if there's additional questions that you have. I would love to hear if there was one or a couple of things, excuse me, about this gathering that were really particularly helpful for you. I would also love to hear if there was something that wasn't helpful for you, that just felt like you've already heard it before and it didn't really need to be here. That just really helps me better my gatherings and my content and material, which I take very seriously. If you haven't noticed at this point, I'm very dedicated to this work. Feel free to do that in the chat box now. I would so love to hear it, as well as any questions about this topic or other topics that aren't related to this topic that we covered today, maybe other online gatherings that you've come to that you have questions about, or just other things that are happening with your nutrition path. Now would be a really good time to enter that into the chat box, and I'll just hang out. And again, I want to thank you all so much. And, you know, please reward yourself for showing up today at this gathering. This takes a lot of your time to be here, and you're just a rock star to show up and work on these vulnerable topics. So thank you for showing up and being committed to your growth. So a big, big hooray for you. So do something great for yourself today for really showing up. It takes bravery to show up, right? It takes courage to write in the chat box and to be here. Okay. My mom has 3 or 4 bird feeders out here, and the birds are just going crazy right now. They're so fun to watch. They're pretty amazing. Okay. So good. Question coming through. Yeah, you're welcome, Danica. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. So I feel so bad, guilty when I acknowledge I'm overeating, either in the moment or in hindsight. This is a neurological pattern that needs breaking too. Absolutely. Absolutely. When we are aware in the moment of our emotional eating or in hindsight, the number one thing that will guarantee keep us in our cycles is self-judgment and self-criticism. Compassion truly is the way out. You know, so maybe going back to last online gathering where we talked about those self-judgments and how they really, really play a role here. Yeah, so that alone, I would say if there was one thing, well, at least right now, I say that a lot, but right now it feels like if there was one thing that this food thing was trying to show us, it's that we need to be kinder to ourselves. And that takes practice because we're not used to doing that. What if I'm in a situation that is causing me to emotionally eat, but I am not in the position to be able to leave? And I'm not in the position to be able to leave. I haven't even read the last part of your question, and I'll read it in just a moment. Is it really you can't leave? Like, we should all be able to leave. If you really need to leave, you can always go use the restroom, or you can take a phone call. I'm trying to really think, guest 768, if you can say a little bit more about a time when you really, really can't leave. We always have that right. Is there some way I can cure emotional eating in this situation anyways? Yeah, I guess I would have a hard time understanding which situation that would be. But oh, I'm talking about my marriage. Okay. Yeah, okay. So maybe something's going on in your marriage and then you're in emotional eating patterns because of your marriage. Yeah, I guess I would need, is there specifically a moment when it's happening? Do you feel like it's happening at dinner, or do you feel like it's happening when you're on your own? Do you feel like it's when you're in the presence of your marriage? Guess 768. So tell me just a little bit more about what's going on, because I'd really like to do my best to support you on that. Thank you for, so I'm just going to move on while you do that. Guess 768. Thank you for reinforcing. Don't focus on the food. Food is not the problem. Life stressors are the problem. I was focusing on the food, thinking I was doing a mindful eating practice. Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm so glad. You're welcome. I mean, this work is about the food, but it's also not about the food. So it's this kind of unique blend, but we do focus way more on the food than we need to be, especially when we're talking about emotional eating. Now, if we're talking about biological overeating, it's definitely about food. If we're under eating, we need to be talking about food. We need to be making sure you're getting enough. Otherwise, you're going to overeat. I'm going to overeat. We all are. Psychological overeating, we need to be talking about the food, how you're relating to the food. But this one, this emotional overeating, this is about life stressors. So I'm glad to reinforce that. Wonderful. Good. Any other questions? Guest 768, I'd still love to hear a little bit more about what's going on for you. If you're willing to share a little bit more, and that's okay if you're not, feel free to shoot me an email. And anyone who is hesitant, this work is so vulnerable. So if you want to just shoot me an email, or jump on the phone and schedule a 20-minute free consult, let's talk about these a little bit more. And if anyone's wanting just a little bit more support on this, starting in June, I have 2 openings for 2 new clients. So I'd love to speak with any of you about that, if any of you are interested. And you can go to the website and go to the Work With Me page and schedule that 20-minute free consult, either to talk about working together or to just talk about what's going on here for you with these questions or things you might want to share. I love hearing from you, you guys. You're not a pest. You're not, don't watch any stories that you tell yourself about, like maybe, Mackenzie's so busy, or what am I really going to ask her? Or, I love hearing from you guys. It makes my day. Okay. So guest 768 says, my husband is unemployed at the moment and around a lot. Yep. Yeah. You don't have much space is what I'm hearing, and always making me feel like I don't do anything right. Okay. So he's self-critical of you, which is very challenging. I can't clean enough. I can't cook well enough. I'm just not good enough in any way. And he picks at everything I do. I know it is something wrong with him, not me, but it weighs on me to have negativity, and the anger constantly is hard. I would absolutely be an emotional eater in that situation as well. It's a very challenging situation. That is a suffocating dynamic. Guest 768, my heart goes out to you. You need support. You really need support. I recommend not trying to do this alone. Hugs are coming to you from other participants as well. You'll need to start speaking up. And if you need help speaking up, get a therapist or a coach. Sometimes my clients say, I know you're a nutritionist, but you're also like a boundary maker. You help me set boundaries. Sounds like you really need to set boundaries with him. He is not allowed to speak to you that way. And you're just going to resent him even more. So getting support on how to work through that and creating those boundaries for yourself. Thinking about how you want to set boundaries with him, and then what you want to hear from him. How much you want to let those comments affect you. It's up to us. We have to also take responsibility in how much we believe what people say about us. So you'll need to do your own work around that as well. So get support around that. That is very hard. Food is the rescuer in that situation. It is the thing that is helping you feel better. The source is creating that boundary with your marriage. Yeah. Yeah, and you feel like you've told him that and he's not listening. It's a very challenging situation, and keep speaking up. Keep speaking up, and I send you strength that you can do that. And you might say that marriage counseling is something that you need to do, and maybe you're already there, and maybe you need to go again. These things go in cycles, right? Like they need a constant reminding of themselves, and so you might need to start a new cycle, a new, like, going back to therapy again. You might need to ask yourself if this is a marriage you want to be in as well. So my heart goes out to you, guest 768. Okay, good. Well, anybody else have questions? I'll stand for just another minute. It's really starting to rain. I was not expecting that. It wasn't supposed to rain until 6, but okay. Okay. So anybody else have questions? Yeah. Guess 768. I recommend that you get some help right away with that, and you get professional support. Unfortunately, this is going to go out of the scope of our gathering today, and what I can offer as a nutritionist. This is a relationship issue that you're going to need to get some support with. Okay. It sounds like you've already been to therapy because you said you tried that. So you really need to go to your therapist about this. Okay, you need to go back to that therapist and explain this to your therapist and have individual sessions with this therapist. Okay. Okay. Thanks so much for sharing, everybody. My hugs go out to you, everyone. Thank you so much for taking this time. Please do something great for yourself today for showing up and being committed to this work. And last call for any other comments or questions. Lots of food for thought. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. You guys are all stars for being here. Just showing up is a lot. Thanks for your time. Yeah, thanks. Sonia says, sorry I wasn't able to be fully present on this one. That's okay. I'm glad you were here. Yeah. Okay, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and close off of live broadcast, and I'll stay in the chat box for a few more minutes. And have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time with new technology. Bye, everyone.